Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Movie Mates podcast. I am Matthew, of course, joined by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Kel.
Hey man, lovely to see you. So on today's show, we're back reviewing a couple more horror films, and it's been a while since Callum and I have sort of reviewed. I've done a podcast on horror before. We've done classic horror back in the early days of the podcast, and more recently with Freaky and New Mutants. So I'm going to pass over to Callum to explain what two films we're going to be talking about on today's podcast episode. Really excited for this one. Off to you, man.
So, in anticipation of The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It, which is coming out a lot later than I thought it was. So we're doing this very, very early,
In
but
advance, but
good to be prepared.
absolutely.
And I thought it was a good idea because it's only two films, and I thought we'd have our hands full this week with Zack Snyder's Justice League. So today we'll be talking about the first Conjuring film and the second Conjuring film. Two films about the paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Investigating these paranormal cases based on true events.
We use that
A
term
very
loosely.
loose,
Yeah,
a very
definitely.
loose basis.
Definitely, mate. Yeah, and that's one thing that really surprised me about these two films, that they are based on what James Wan and the production team had said were true events. So I'm really excited to get to talking to about the true events and things that happened there as well. But yeah, just before we kick off today's episode, thank you very much for everyone who supported us recently, who's liked, shared, subscribed, commented. Calm and I really do appreciate that loads. And our email, moviematespodcast@gmail.com, is in the description, as well as time codes for the movies. And yeah, so this will probably be added to our horror playlist as well. So Callum, I'll let you open the floor, mate, with your thoughts on the first Conjuring, which actually surprised me. It was quite some time ago. It was like 2013 or something. It was quite a while
I
ago,
think so,
actually.
yeah.
Yeah, 7 years. Say seven
Well,
years now.
I was just watching the film, experiencing it, and I was wondering how exactly do you watch a horror film? What's your approach that you take?
Well, like I said a couple episodes ago, I never used to be a huge fan of horror films, mate, to be honest with you. But more recently with films like Freaky, those sort of slasher horror films, I've become more of a fan. And with these two films, we'll talk about the first one. It's not really that. It's definitely not that slasher element. It's more of a suspenseful mystery of it's the plot's unraveling as we go. And it is more of akin to the classics that we watched with The Omen and certainly The Exorcist back then. And I think for me, the way I would typically watch a horror film is probably from behind a pillow, usually. But with this film, I think what James Wan does really well is like there's no real sort of undeserving scares. Like I think all the scares do work for the most part. Like it's a very suspenseful film, but likewise, like it doesn't get it. For me, it didn't really get lost in the meandering of a plot. But how do you watch horror films, mate? Are you a big fan of the genre or not really?
I'm not massive on it, because I think you know a lot of films that are sort of this age rating, which here is a 15. I think they are sort of a starter horror film, like a sort of soft introduction into the genre for maybe younger people. It maybe has one or two effective scares out of 10 or 20, for people of our age. But I think it's certainly an admirable effort, to sort of bring young people
Yeah.
into being fans of it. So I watched both these films, at 2 a.m. with the lights off. And
Oh,
the,
that's
the
risky.
the the biggest scare for me was, are my neighbors gonna call the police? As a noise complaint. But I was respectful, but they're fucking loud, aren't they?
Dude,
Like all the screams and the
dude.
pretty much every scare is accentuated by music, and it's this really loud, discordant, sort of hit of the
Orchestral thing.
piano,
Yeah,
and it's yeah, and it really works effectively, but it's fucking loud.
it is loud.
Are you a lights on or lights off man?
Uh, See, one thing I have been really getting into recently is listening to podcasts at nighttime. So like I usually like my sleep has been really bad at the minute, mate, to be honest with you. Like 3 a.m. I'm up listening to this podcast. And obviously back in the very first episode of the podcast, you and I had sort of introduced the podcast by talking about podcasts that we listen to. Obviously the Weekly Planet, the Pretty Plan podcast, I think was starting around then. And obviously one of them I listened to was Case File, and it has done a lot of similar cases to the Conjuring, like the Exorcist and stuff like that. So like I'm just up at night, like with the lights off, 3 a.m., just listening to this podcast. And like one thing that really freaks me out is when they play like the 999 calls of like people who are like clearly terrified and shit like that. So Like when any slight noise outside, mate, if I'm listening to a podcast like that or a horror film, I'm just like, oh shit, is there someone outside? Do you know what I mean? But yeah, like with this one, I think it does feel. I think we sort of mentioned this all podcast, mate. It does feel a very cliched. It takes a lot of different things from a lot of different films, and maybe it is because like Patrick Wilson, by his own admission, I suppose, is kind of like the um the the pinnacle of sort of Hollywood, sorry, of horror actors. Like I think he was in Insidious, and he's been in loads and
Mhm.
loads of other ones. So do you think it is quite cliche?
Well, that sort of leads back to it being sort of a starter horror film. I think it's
Yeah,
a soft introduction into this universe, which has obviously expanded since, and to the genre itself. So I think it does use a lot of cliches, but it is, I think it's original in the introduction of the paranormal investigators. Normally in
I
a
like that. Yeah.
haunted house type film, it would be the people within the house sorting it out, or
Hmm.
calling someone in, but they're sort of a one note character. And the comparison with the Exorcist is very accurate, I think, because the Exorcist gets called in two-thirds into that film. He has a few lines, he's barely in it, even though he's the namesake of the film. So I think giving personality to the people playing that Exorcist character adds a certain depth to it, at least.
Yeah, oh for sure, mate, for sure. And like we sort of mentioned at the start of this episode, this is based on what sort of the marketing deemed to be true events. And like I was looking on Wikipedia, and a lot of that is disputed, like a lot of it, especially like I think it's the Amityville case or something, like I think it is something
Hmm.
like that. And
Hmm.
obviously that this film has the 1970s setting with both Ed and Lorraine Warren, and which actually blew my mind. Like when I first heard of this film, I was like, "Oh, must be an original creation, James Wan." But no, like these people are real people. You know what I mean? Lorraine Warren had a huge involvement in this film, so she did. And I was just, I think it's a really unique bit of movie trivia for me because I just didn't expect it whatsoever. You know what I mean? What about you? Did you know that going in?
Yeah, I did. I'd heard a fair bit about, especially the story about Annabelle. Which we see in
Oh
this in
yes,
the
yeah.
sort of prologue of the film, which is then going on to be further expounded in the Annabelle trilogy, which we'll be talking about in the coming months. You know, and let's be honest, that story I think it's a solid enough premise for a 5 minute prologue, but three films, like
Yeah,
they're not ones I'm
yeah, I
looking
know.
forward to talking about, because I think they're just gonna be weak, honestly.
Hmm.
But you know, I did know a fair bit going in, but I think the wide consensus is that they're just con artists, who
Hmm.
are
Uh,
drawing attention to get people into their museum,
mhm.
because they do, operate this museum that we see within the film, where people can
Yeah,
come and
all the
look at the
artifacts.
Annabelle doll.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's currently closed, I think, for repairs. Fun fact. But I think it's, well, I suppose that sort of leads into the question: do you believe in the paranormal? Because I think if you're committed to believing in the paranormal, these guys are as believable as any paranormal investigator.
Yeah, like I think paranormal activity is certainly one of the biggest conspiracy theories about. You've got your moon landing, you've got your sort of Illuminati, and then you've got your like spirits and paranormal activity and stuff. Like those for me are the big hitters. And I think it's a really interesting one because like on the surface level, you'd think I suppose theoretically people like spirits and ghosts and stuff could exist in a different frequency or something like that. Like that seems like scientifically plausible to me, but one thing I definitely doubt is like people who can communicate with them, or people who are like paranormal investigators who are giving lectures and like in colleges and stuff like that. Like that seems to me like that's so unproven. Like the stuff that Ed and Lorraine are lecturing these students about. So it kind of seems to me like I'm not too sure if I believe the validity of that. Excuse me, but I don't know. It's one of the things like if someone had turned around to me and said who factually knew that ghosts existed or spirits and stuff existed, I'd be like, oh yeah, I mean, fair. But I'm not sure when it's when people say oh demons and things like that. I don't know. It's a very sort of it's a very religious thing, isn't it? The demons and the spirits and
Hmm.
stuff like it. It goes back to the Bible, doesn't it? With Satan and God and stuff, doesn't it? So it's been there for thousands of years. So I don't know. What do you think, mate? Do you believe in that kind of stuff?
Well, I definitely agree with you that I think religion would make sense of that, but I'm not really a religious guy. But
Yeah,
it
neither.
does make sense if you're looking at it through a religious eye. There's heaven and hell, and then the space in between is existence as a ghost in purgatory of,
Yeah.
ghost existence on Earth. That in my brain, if that was my sort of background, that I think I could make sense of that. But I think, I'm a, see it to prove it kind of guy.
Yeah, yeah, I get you,
I would
100%, mate.
need to experience something. So, I'm pretty much open to anything. I'm agnostic about most things. Open to
Definitely, mate.
opinions, sort of widely. But in the current moment, I'd say no. But, I'm open to
Yeah,
anything. My opinions can change on a dime from time to time.
yeah,
But normally I wouldn't believe in ghosts. But if anything that happened in this film happened to me, I'd have jumped to ghosts a lot sooner
million
than the
percent,
characters in this film did.
million percent, mate. Like we see
They're just like,
chairs flying all over
yeah,
the place. Like,
yeah, they're just like
it's
dead dog. Let's move on.
yeah, yeah. Always
Not
just the
not
dog.
even a not even a tear shed.
Like that's a classic horror movie trope, isn't it, mate? Where like when they bring a pet into the new haunted house or something, the pet barks or something or sees something or doesn't go in the house like this dog. That's always an indicator, mate, for me. Like it's always just a dog, always just a dog. Like, um, but yeah, like I think one thing that James Wan does really well here in this film. Apologies if my internet's quite dodgy, mate. I'm not sure if I'm lagging there.
Oh no, it's good for me.
But one thing I think James Wan does really well is like build a really sinister tone. Like I think I was watching a video there just before we came on today about like how the production was made for these two films, and the real actually haunted house, like they could have filmed in it, they were gonna film in it, but like he just had bad vibes in there. Like he went in, he was like, I just felt something was off. I just got spooked. So they built the prosthetic house like for this film. Like they had to build a set, and I think that's really interesting. I think he sort of used his own fear potentially to have that relevant in his film. I think the exorcism, like there's always a building suspense in that film mixed with the goriness of the prosthetics used there, and I think the mix of prosthetics here with the tone as well, it makes for a really cliche but a really well made film, if you know what I mean.
Mm. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think we can both agree this is more of a jump scare film than a
Yeah,
psychological or a
yeah,
slasher.
yeah,
And like
absolutely, mate.
in all honesty, in principle at least, that would be my least favorite of those three options. And within this film, I didn't get scared by the jump scares, but I think that's maybe just down to you know a sort of base level cynicism with me, where I'm just like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's gonna be a ghost around that corner. Someone so there's an over the shoulder shot, gonna be a ghost when they turn around.
Yeah.
Like, so I mean, nothing comes as a surprise, but I think that's just being jaded by watching too many films. But I respect and admire, as I said, the use of music to accentuate those scares, and I think also experience of it is gonna vary differently, from where you see it. I'd like to think that cinemas will be open when the third film comes out, and
Hope so.
I'd love to go see it, because I don't think I've
The
ever seen a
noise.
horror film in the cinema, except for maybe The Visit, M Night Shyamalan's film, where I snuck in underage.
Oh, you naughty,
Not naughty
naughty
naughty,
boy.
but I think an experience in the cinema is going to vary drastically from one where you feel safe and comfortable in your own home.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think if the
exactly.
scares are good enough in the Conjuring 3 and we get to see it in the cinema, I'm shitting myself probably.
I think you've raised a number of good points there, mate. In regards to like the sort of the latter point there about would we find it a little bit more intimidating in the cinema? I think for me, it's a mix of yes and no. For me, yes, because of the noise and the sound design and the quality of the sound in the cinema and the big screen, like that would scare the shit out of me. And like even in the second film, there's like a scene with like the old possessed man where like he comes out. It's not actually, we don't actually see him in the tent, but like you just hear a noise of him and it's like it's terrifying. But then I think at the end with the cinema argument, for me, because there'll be so much people around us and like strength in numbers, like I'll be less scared because there's a lot of people around me. Whereas if I'm at my own home and it's like late at night, it's just me, I can feel a bit more scared. But I think it's a really interesting argument. And in regards to the sort of to the point about the film and how it's maybe based for a younger audience, because this film is in a series of horror films, did it seem to you like it was trying to create a franchise off the bat, or did it seem to you like could you watch this as a standalone film? Because I think it does kind of work in the Back to the Future sense, where you could just watch them as you could watch these two films as like a 4 hour film for me. Like they work together reasonably nicely. How does it work? How does it fit for you, mate?
Yeah, the sort of introduction of all the artifacts within their sort of private museum did sort of feel like they were, sort of laying the groundwork for future films,
Yeah.
which is of course what they were doing with. Well, I mean, it wasn't really by design that they did that with Annabelle, because they decided to put that project into production after the reception to this film, and the use of the character within that film. So Annabelle to me felt like it was establishing something for the future, but I mean, in truth, it wasn't really. It was just audience reaction that sort of spawned that film. So I mean, not really, not massively. I think that there's more characters, more demons introduced within the second film, but it still didn't feel anything. Uh, nothing felt out of place. Everything felt like it had a purpose within the film it was in.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a really great analysis, Cam. To be honest with you, man. And for me, in regards to like the performances within the film, because it's not the most star-studded cast ever. Like with some horror films, like you have, like some of them have like great like really well-known casts, and I think it's becoming more of a genre that appeals to younger people. For me, like teenagers and stuff. But here, I think Patrick Wilson's actually so underrated. I actually really like him. And obviously we've got the Aquaman connection with James Wan and Patrick Wilson again. And I don't know, I kind of feel like James Wan, I think he himself, I was looking at his filmography. I think he did Fast and Furious 7 as well as the Conjuring films. I think he might have did Insidious. I'm not sure if that's correct. Did he do Insidious or not?
I'm not sure.
No, but yeah, even if he didn't, I think still got a very varied filmography, and Patrick Wilson, I think, really does do well. It does feel 1970s, is what I'm trying to say. Like
Hmm.
it feels like authentic to that time period, which I suppose is helped by the fact that the real life Lorraine Warren did help in the production.
Hmm. And I was sort of worried going into this film that it would be a bit weird having this outside duo enter the house, because it's not a structure I was familiar with, which is
Yeah,
something I think this movie does do that feels fresh. But with their investigation of the case, I thought it would maybe feel a bit forced or weird that they were sort of inserting themselves into this family. But
mm,
honestly, Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga are so unrelentingly charming that I think their
agreed,
inclusion was delightful.
million
Like
percent.
Patrick Wilson, I have to say, is the standout to me, especially in the second film. Like
He's so
whenever
good
he
in the
was
second one.
playing,
Yeah,
whenever he was playing the Elvis song on
yeah,
the guitar,
it's
and then he was
yeah,
doing all the DIY in the house, I was like,
yeah,
this is a
fixing the pipes and
domestic
stuff.
god.
Yeah,
I
like
love this man.
he
I
feels
wish I
real.
was this man.
Yeah, Patrick Wilson, like he's just got the slick back hair. He's got in the second film there's Elvis karaoke. He's fixing the family the drain pipes and stuff. He's just a lovely. He feels real. Like he feels great. And one thing I think about this one point you really mentioned there has sort of struck a chord in my head is when you said it is quite rare, I think, for me for a horror film to have two outside characters be invested and come into the fray sort of later on. Like obviously with most horror films, you kind of get it's a family film where it's just contained in the grounds of the house or the premises. But here, like you kind of see the outside influence. It's almost like Ghostbusters to me. Like the Ghostbusters come in, they have to sort of identify the paranormal activity. Whereas here, it
Yeah.
kind of it allows James Wan, I think, in the film to like go off in different directions. Like it's happily he'll go off and explore Ed and Lorraine's life with their daughter and stuff, and especially in the second film. And obviously, it's just refreshing not to have it contained in the one house. That can work. I think The Exorcist does that really well, and I think other films to that degree, as well. Like Get Out really stands to reason to me that it sort of is contained in that property and that premises for the most part. But here, I think I like the way it feels. It doesn't have to stick there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think it's the performances and James Wan's direction that turns these characters from the sort of one note
Mm.
priest, more of a trope, in films like The Exorcist, into characters.
Yeah,
And they are the franchise. They're sort of their involvement is the glue that holds all the films together. And I think that's down to the performances really, because
yeah,
I think if you didn't care about them, then I think the film wouldn't work. I mean, I think these are probably very favorable portrayals of the
oh yeah.
Warrens,
You think
because
so? Yeah,
I mean, if you, it depends which side you take, I guess, if you believe, hard line, that the ghosts don't exist, then they're objectively con artists in your mind, or, the reverse, so I mean, I suppose I'm a bit of a fence sitter in that way from time to time, but, saying it's objectively true and these were like the best, kindest people in the world, it is a favorable portrayal,
No,
presumably.
it absolutely is. Yeah. And given that the fact that James Wan presents that these events did actually happen, that these demons do exist, I think the demon in this film, is it like Bethsaida or something? She's called or
Oh,
something like that.
I didn't even know they said the name of the
Oh,
demon in
I
this
don't know,
film.
yeah. But no, like but I think the fact that obviously Wan presents it as a real event, it does obviously, it's a very favorable portrayal, don't get me wrong, but I think it's a very interesting narrative because you can kind of flip it on its head and you kind of can see Ed and Lorraine as almost the villains if you think of it that way, if they are canonized. But obviously, given that the events did happen in the universe that the film creates, it stands to reason that's quite a favorable portrayal. But I mean, yeah, I think I don't have a huge amount to say on this film. Like horror films are really hard for me to review. I have more to say kind of plot point wise about the second one, but for me, I
Mm.
think this film it creates a really great tone. I think it's simultaneously does the cliches well, but also has unique elements like these outside characters coming into the fray. And I just think it's a really great sort of introductory horror film. I think for people who just maybe want to try out the genre.
Mm. And one thing that I have to really point to the film as being incredible is the soundtrack. I think it's a Suicide Squad situation where it's fantastic music that doesn't really fit where they've put it.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
especially in the sequel, I think the music is incredible, but they've just slapped it on a scene where it doesn't really make much sense. But here, they play music by two of my favorite bands, the Zombies and Dead Man's Bones. And it's just incredible. You know Dead Man's Bones, right?
I
Ryan
don't,
Gosling's
mate.
band.
I don't, mate.
Come on, Ryan Gosling's band.
Okay, Ryan Gosling fan. I didn't know he had a band, but I knew he was a bit of a musician. So I know, mate. I
I've
know.
I've,
I
I've
know.
definitely played his music.
I'm sure you probably have. I'll probably recall it, but I maybe didn't know it was a
To
band.
be fair, they've only released one album, and I have bought it at
Is it good?
great expense.
Is it worth it?
It's incredible. It's like weird and experimental. Because you don't really hear of horror music like they invented their own genre nearly.
I like that.
It's very weird and experimental. But all their songs are about like ghosts or zombies or everything that would be comfortable in the horror genre. And I think it sort of skyrocketed to success when it was featured in this film.
Mhm.
And like it's some incredible music, if I'm honest.
That's cool. Yeah, I'll definitely give it a wee listen in a spare time. Yeah, I mean, I think especially yeah, the second one does definitely. There are a lot of popular songs. Like I'll mention one in particular, which I'm a big fan of, but you probably guess what it is. But yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
the soundtrack is always great, and James Wan really surprised me. Like I knew he was a really well known and really successful director, but I didn't think he had sort of like when I look at Aquaman, I kind of look at that film and I think there's no real heart there. It's just for me anyway, how I kind of felt about it was like it was just your typical superhero film and like action, vibrant costumes, comic accurate. It didn't really have any heart or substance. Whereas this film, I think there is a clear narrative here to me. Like the characters feel real. I know it's hard when a comic book film is it's not maybe the best
Yeah.
comparison, but what I'm trying to say is I feel like there's more substance here. There's more going on than just the surface level, and that's why I liked it so much, mate.
Yeah, I think he was maybe just taken out of his genre with Aquaman. Like
Mhm.
I I'm
It's a
not
weird
looking
director
forward
to
to an
pick for that.
Aquaman sequel.
It's a weird
Sorry?
director to pick. That's such a weird director to
Yeah.
pick for an Aquaman film, isn't it? It's such a strange choice. I mean, it was. I still liked the film, but it was quite a weird one, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we don't really see too many films, that are sort of under the sea kind of vibes, so I don't really know, I don't know who you choose for that, but it wasn't a horror film, I suppose you would choose sort of a typical comic book movie director or, what one that would be expected of that, because, they chose I think it's David F. Sandberg, for Shazam, who's also a horror director who did like films like Lights Out. That film in like the third act, you have these sort of awakened demons almost, fighting the
Yeah.
the Shazam family. So that to me makes a bit more sense. There seems to be this sort of this sort of vibe of
Undertone.
dread almost.
Yeah, definitely.
Dread and threat within that film that
Mhm.
sort of isn't in
Isn't
Aquaman.
No, it isn't, mate. It isn't. You're absolutely spot on there, mate. I have to agree. Have you got any more comments, mate, in the film?
Just a few, near the very end of the film,
Of course.
we see that Ed and Lorraine's daughter is very nearly attacked by some kind of presence within their home that is stroking Annabelle's hair, whilst in a rocking chair. If you cared about your daughter, you wouldn't keep demonically possessed items in your house, would you?
Dude,
You'd
especially
have a
like
separate building.
exactly, mate. Exactly. Like especially the Annabelle doll. Like That blows my mind that that's a real thing as well. Like, I completely thought that was just a pop culture thing that was created in a movie years ago. That's a real thing, and I've
Hmm.
seen it in real life. Like, it's arguably even creepier than the one in the film. Like, for me, I don't know. It's a strange looking thing, but yeah, you'd absolutely not have a demonic possessed item anywhere near your kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and how this film sort of wraps up. How this film sort of wraps up. It feels like it revs up to a finish that doesn't quite come. I think
Mm,
they
I
they
get that. Yeah.
expel the witch from Carolyn's body and then they just call it a day. Like it feels like there's sort of more to mine there. But they just bin it off. They're like, job done.
Yeah.
And the talk from the husband. There is this sort of trope where if there's demonic possession or something overcoming someone, you have a loved one give an impassioned speech to help them fight through it, and he's just like, come on, you can do this. Like, it was like,
Not
it was
exactly
like coming home
inspirational.
from like a tough day at work. Like, it was just the most
Tough day at the
monotone, weak
office.
shit I'd ever heard.
Tough day at the office, mate. No, I know what you mean. Like, I think the main crux of the film for me, the main zenith of it, was when Ed does the exorcism himself, and he's like, "By the power of God, I compel you to leave this," or whatever it says. Like, it's a great spin in that classic line for me, and I just think it's a really well done scene. Like, if I had a wife or something, or if I had a partner and like she was like being possessed by a demon, like I just couldn't shake that in my head. I was like, no, I can't do this. Like, it's such a weird, it's a horrifying thing to view, isn't it? Like, and you do hear about those stories in real life, mate. About these real life exorcisms that took place by the exorcists or the church, and it's horrifying. Like, the torture and the pain those people must have went through. Like, it's awful. Like, you sort of realize like this film tries to present it as a true story, but like these kind of things do happen. Well, certainly exorcism wise, they do. And yeah, I mean, it's a really sinister film, isn't it? Especially like when it just mixes in so many other different things, like the Annabelle doll and obviously the nun in the second film. Like, just a mismatch of sinisterness for me, isn't it? But it works, so it does work.
Yeah, I don't have anything else on the film.
No, neither for me, Callum. Well, I'd love to hear your rating for this one.
Well, I think pretty much everything that needs to be said has been. I think it's a perfectly enjoyable haunted house film. Maybe not my selected genre. I probably wouldn't have watched this film if I didn't feel it was sort of you know like we were missing out.
Yeah,
I
I get
wouldn't have
that.
chosen to watch a film of this kind. Especially haunted house. The haunted house genre within the horror genre is probably one that I'm just not a massive fan of, which is probably why I preferred The Conjuring 2, which is, I mean, it's technically still a haunted house, but
There's more going
there's
on
something
there.
a
There's
bit
more
a
going
bit more
on.
deep there.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's more going on. So it felt real long. I don't know why. It was under 2 hours.
yeah.
It
Shorter than
felt
the
it
first.
felt real long. So
Hmm.
did the second one. I had to watch the second one in two chunks. I did have quite a good time. I thought the scares were effective for the intended audience. I thought the performances were great. I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
Do you,
yeah.
do you do you ever just like arbitrarily throw out a number and you're like, is this right?
Yeah,
Like
I
I
get
don't
like
know.
that sometimes. Yeah, like I'm not too sure in my head. I want to give it one rating, but then I want to give it another cut, so I just have to go in the middle ground. Well,
Yeah,
I
because
had
then
it.
you're
Yeah,
like you're
you
like
had it.
I enjoyed that quite a bit, but then if that's only 2 points off being perfect, is that really like is that too generous?
Hmm.
But then you don't want to seem like a dick for a movie that you did enjoy.
Yeah,
Like
I
it,
get
it
that
is
like hundred
difficult when
percent.
people already hate people who talk about films, but
Like,
we're not critics,
we're not
we're
critics.
reviewers.
We're just two
We're
film
just talking
obsessed
about,
teens.
yeah, I feel like some critics would be like, it's a bad film and you're a bad person for having made it.
Yeah,
I feel like,
take it personally.
in
Yeah,
in the sense that like commentary YouTubers are like, your content is bad, you're a bad
you're
person.
cancelled,
Like we'd
sort of
never
thing. Yeah,
accuse anyone of that. We just go, did we enjoy it? Yeah or no?
yeah,
I would say rarely, we're even talking about the quality of a film. We're just talking about the plot. We're
yeah.
just having a
Enjoyment.
chat. Like,
Yeah, does it
yeah,
make sense? Yeah.
it's more of a breakdown, quite
Exactly.
honestly.
I know it is, man. And like, I feel bad for anyone who is like, who just has to analyze all our like, who's like looked at all our reviews for different films, because like some of my rating systems just do not make sense looking back now. Given I was going to give this film an 8 as well, but like when I gave Winnie the Pooh or something a 10, I was like, I did far prefer this film than Winnie the Pooh. So I was like, what am I thinking? But
Yeah.
I think it's all in context. Like, maybe for me at the time, Like when I give a Riverdale episode an 8, that's in context of Riverdale. So I think if that's an
Yeah.
8, that's a very good episode of Riverdale. Whereas like you say, like you sometimes say, like an 8 out of 10 episode of Riverdale is probably like a 6 or a 7 for normal TV, maybe the lower. So it's all in context. So like if I was going to give this film a rating in context of horror films that I've seen and films with similar tones and vibes, I'll give it an 8 as well. I think the performances are great. It's quite unique in the sense that we've got this sort of true element going on here. And I think the second film improves on it actually, which is nice to see. So I'd give this one an 8, to be honest with you. I think it's a very solid introductory film for people who want to be invested in horror films, you know. And I mean, I suppose we could talk about the second one, mate. I'll let you open the floor there, man.
Yeah, I think we both agreed that, off podcast, we agreed that this is more plot heavy. But, pretty much every, relevant point about, construction of the filmmaking carries over to this film
Yeah.
because it's equally impressive. And, my first point, it took me a while to sort of settle into it. I think the plot, sort of is a slow build. And just the first one I had was 11-year-old school children smoking. I just thought that the screenwriter was like, I know the bloody English, that this is what they
Yeah.
get up to. I'm like, what, how old is the youngest person you've ever seen smoking?
Yeah,
Not 11.
not 11. Yeah, maybe like 15 for me anyway. But yeah, I think for me, well, obviously like we've seen a lot more British films than probably the typical American, given that like we sort of live there, you know what I mean? So I think for me, whenever I see like an American interpretation of the UK, it's always like as cliche as it gets. You've got the classic
Oh,
Cockney
bloody hell,
accent.
governor.
Yeah. Bloody hell, governor! It's the he's such a wanker. It's the classic sort of
I
like
was so confident that those accents were fake, but then I looked it up and the actors are actually British.
yeah, but you know what I mean. Like whenever obviously in this film, right, the cliche "London Calling" by the Clash. That's the level.
Yeah,
I love that song, but that's on the nose.
it doesn't work, does it?
No, it doesn't. It like I think having a UK setting for a horror film is really promising. You know what I mean? I think London in particular has had such a big influence on that kind of supernatural element. Obviously, I think with the Egyptians, London and the UK archaeologists had a big role in like Tutankhamun and stuff like that. And obviously that's not really relevant here, but with sort of the setting being different from America, it kind of feels like sort of an evolution of the narrative. They've now moved on to sort of overseas issues here, so they're becoming more and more well known. And I think having a UK setting, it's just fresh. It's something new, and I quite liked it, even though it was really cliche in a sense as well, with its portrayal.
Yeah, and it is once again, another haunted house film. And that of course encompasses, these residences, sorry, these residents of these houses, being terrified for their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And they just seem to, they're always dismissive of the supernatural element, but they love to investigate this scary stuff.
They do,
I'd probably
don't
just
they?
go to bed and accept that the worst scenario is I'm gonna get killed. I do that before I would, go investigate something or really loud noise. I just like, yeah, just bin it off. Play the podcast I'm listening to a little louder.
Yeah,
Because
exactly. Yeah.
it seems that every goal of the demons within these two films is I want to take you over to kill your family, or I want to kill your family myself. And I'm like, if you really wanted to, they'd be dead. Like,
I
how
agree.
difficult is it?
Yeah,
Like, that little girl has been possessed by the old man. If you really wanted them dead,
you'd
pick
kill
up a
them.
knife, stab them all to death. It's
You
not
would.
difficult.
No, it's not rocket science, mate. It's not like
Like, it revs up to a finish, in the first film, that, she now has a pair of scissors and she's gonna kill her kids. It's like she's been possessed for half of the movie. It's like, if you want them dead, they'll be dead. So I'd just be like, they probably can't hurt me. Go to bed.
yeah, like if they're not going to kill you immediately, they probably can't do that much harm, and that's exactly the opposite in these films. All powerful demons here, be it the nun or the witch in the first one, they all just feel the need to use their power on children's toys just for a cheap gag. It's such a classic horror film trope, that isn't it? Like I do get it; it builds suspense, but when you look a bit deeper, you think, you just kill them instantly, wouldn't you? You wouldn't just like stalk them in the mirror and entice them into your wardrobe. You just kill them, just wouldn't you?
Yeah,
You know
I
what I mean?
mean, I
But
guess it's maybe the thrill of the chase,
the thrill
but
of the
then
chase, yeah.
when you get a little too cocky with that, and then the investigators come in and you're fucked.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe just get on with it. But
That's
I
fair.
think once again, for me, the scares weren't ever that impactful. I think there were probably two examples where I maybe went like, hmm. And that was when the old man appeared, under the water, whenever Ed's in the basement, and then when near the end of the film, like the nun appears, uh, over Lorraine's shoulder, you know. But something that I found very commendable was their horror villain establishment with Valak the nun and the Crooked Man. I think they were both very
Agreed.
visually interesting, and both will be getting spin-offs. The nun has had her film; she's going to be getting a sequel, and then the Crooked Man is in development. I don't think that there's no depth to the Crooked Man that we see so far. But I think at least when it comes to visual impact, I think they were very
Million
well
percent, mate.
established.
Million percent. Like it's a perfect mix of CGI and prosthetics for me. And I have to say, I think the Nun in this franchise, it has to be one of the creepiest horror film figures in recent memory. I think it's a terrifying switch, and that kind of it plays in that like the religious connotations of an exorcism with that sort of that religious figure of the nun. So I think it's a really smart move. And I just think I just think it's a perfect sort of subversion of that kind of idea. And obviously in this film we obviously it's revealed that it was like I think it's Valak, isn't it? The
Mhm.
nun that was all along. Yeah, it was Agatha all along, or rather it was the nun all along here. And I think it's a really interesting one because I arguably found so the old creepy man just as scary as her for me anyway. Like that he's obviously like we mentioned in the first film, the sound design here and the way the audio works is really fantastic. It helps build up the suspense for a scene. And obviously here like it does do a lot different from the first, doesn't it? It's got obviously the setting for one, but it's also got the fact that Ed and Lorraine have to question whether the sort of the paranormal activities are real, whether they're just faking it for publicity and those kind of things. So I think it really it's different enough from the first to be better, but it's also similar enough to sort of keep that continuity going, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and honestly, my favorite scenes within the film are just Ed and Lorraine when they're not investigating.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
you
it's great
know,
to see. Yeah,
we talk about it a lot because you said it's one of your favorite things, but normal people doing normal people stuff.
million percent.
I
Yeah.
just like them having a romantic chat because I sort of feel that there's this undeniable chemistry with them that I just I don't understand because we don't actually see that much development. We haven't seen yet. I think in the third film we'll probably get more insight into the earlier days of their relationship. But I don't know. There's just this chemistry that makes
There
it
is,
so
Callum. There absolutely
so
is.
like captivating to watch. Because the haunting is sort of a standard horror fare. So when you step away from that, it's quite refreshing.
Oh, it absolutely is, man, for sure. And it just those scenes are some of my favorites. And obviously, when you've got sort of Lorraine's kind of vision of seeing Ed be impaled, and obviously you kind of think by the end of the film, you think, oh no, this is gonna happen. This Ed's gonna be killed here. And for the film to subvert that, I was really happy with that, to be honest, because I actually I really love their dynamic. I think they work really really well. And it's kind of interesting. Obviously, you mentioned in the previous film about his sort of Elvis routine here. He's fixing pipes and he's just chatting to the family, just trying to. I think he's trying to put their mind at ease, and he's trying to have them make them have happy thoughts and try to dispel all the fear of the horror aspects. And I think that's probably what would happen in real life. If you have a paranormal investigator in your house, you probably would try to calm everyone down and probably maybe not to try to think of it as too much of a big deal. You know,
Yeah, I just love everything about him. Like even the
definitely.
fact that he was so proud of his painting of a horrifying nun that he decided to mount it in his study. Like I
Yeah,
don't
what a
know. I just
guy.
love the man.
Yeah, definitely, mate. No, I have a real soft spot for his character, to be honest with you, Callum. I think Patrick Wilson is undeniably one of the better actors these days. He's been in a lot of films recently, and I think like we are kind of saying, he's a classic horror film actor, isn't he? I'm trying to think of older actors who I could relate him to, but he's
I don't
just
know, a bit of a Jimmy Stewart type. I don't know.
yeah, no, I know what you mean. Like I just think he's just he has just this warm charisma to him, but also like you wouldn't want to mess with him at the same time. Like I think he's quite a menacing figure too in some instances. But yeah, he's fantastic. He's fantastic.
And you mentioned previously London Calling, and
Yeah,
that's one of your favorite songs, and one of my favorite songs also appears, which is "I
mm.
Started a Joke" by the Bee Gees,
Bee Gees.
and
Yeah, yeah,
they just never really fit, but they're bangers.
they are bangers. Yeah, I think I started a joke as I can't remember if that was used in either a Suicide Squad promotion or a Joker promotion, but it fits really well with either of those two, whichever one it was.
Yeah,
Um,
it was a cover version in the very first Suicide Squad trailer, the Comic Con one from
that's the one.
2015.
That was the one. Yeah, no, it's a great song, and I think it just helps because obviously I think both are British bands, and it just helps to build that sort of that kind of theme there. And I think one thing that is very interesting in this film, it does kind of explore the view of maybe potentially the public here think that Ed and Lorraine are just phonies, like they are con artists. Obviously, with the TV interview, I think there's like a doctor who is who's like a psychologist or something like that, kind of says like, oh, they're all of their stories are hoaxes, like it doesn't really exist. So I think it's an interesting, like, James Wan is creating that narrative there to sort of suggest that that's a view that people have, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't really have anything much further on this film, which is
Neither.
it's sort of a surprise to me because it is pretty plot dense, and there are twists and turns here, where they reveal that there's that they have dominion over Valak once they know her name. I thought that was interesting, and it is played as like sort of a massive twist reveal kind of thing,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, I mean, it would be quite deflating if the you know if the primary villain of the film was just an old man who was a ghost and he wasn't even a demon. Like,
Yeah.
I wish that they sort of went into the difference because a ghost is obviously a person who died and then they're living on past death.
Mhm.
But then not everybody's ghosts, which means some people go to heaven, some people go to hell, and then some people are ghosts, I guess. But then why did they have any power over
Yeah.
movement of things? You
Yeah.
know, I feel like then, if that was the case, the world would be rife with them.
Rife with ghosts, yeah, exactly, mate, exactly. You'd be stumbling all over them. And I think when I haven't watched these two films, it makes sort of me reflect on other horror films you reviewed, especially like the It films. And I kind of think, when I look back at the It films, I think the first one is really, really good. But I look back at the second one, I think, it does some really great stuff in there, bringing the characters into a modern day setting, amazing cast. Like, I think that's some of the
Mm.
best sort of dynamics between actors we've seen recently. I just look back in the end in that film, I think I just bottled that completely, mate, to be honest with you. But yeah, I look back at these two films. I think overall these two are far more consistent than those two films. Like from those two films, like a massive high and like an averagey sort of low end film. But for me, I think these two films they improve as they go on. So I've nothing more to say really, mate. I just wanted to make a wee comparison there. Anything from
Yeah,
yourself?
no, I definitely see that, and I hope the trend continues because I
Hmm.
think the third film is about a case in which uh, a guy murdered his family, I believe, sort of in the same sort of way that of the Amityville murders, but then he used like in a defense as a defense in the court of law that he had been possessed by a demon, which was apparently the first use of that defense in history. So I'm hoping it's kind of this courtroom drama kind of thing because
Yeah, I
then
like that. Yeah,
because then I feel like we'll just get more of Ed and Lorraine, which are honestly
that's what we want.
when it comes to
Yeah.
I have no opinion on the real life counterparts, but within the films played by these actors, I love them to death.
Agreed. Yeah, for sure, mate. Is the third one a prequel or a direct sequel to this one?
I think it's a direct sequel,
Cool.
but I know they've cast young versions of Ed and Lorraine, so I think we're probably going to see the origins of
Hey,
them meeting maybe.
more Ed and Lorraine's always good. It's always a win, mate. But if you were gonna rate this one out of 10, Cam, what would you give it?
Well, I did really, really like this film. I can't quite pinpoint why I prefer it so much to the first. It may just be that there's more Ed and Lorraine, but I think this film managed more scares than the first, and it created a bit more of a mystery, which made it, amount to less of a cliche than the first film. It feels like, it's not scary. Like neither of them are scary, but I don't think that's not necessarily integral. It's especially not integral to just being a good film. Maybe to being a good horror film, meeting the criteria, maybe. But I can't deny its quality. So I'd probably give it an 8.5.
Yeah, I mean, like, for people who are watching this, people probably just think, yeah, I'm just gonna go along with your opinion. I had literally had written an 8.5 in my notes as well. I think it's a minor improvement on the first, and I think one of the strengths of these two films is they are consistent. They feel the same films, and it's always great when you have obviously the same people working on it and things like that. So I think it's a great sort of carry on story, sort of evolution of that story. I think that the villains, the demons are more intimidating here. There's more going on behind the scenes. The narrative is more complicated, but I think that works in the favor of, like we're saying, there's more on the surface, but beneath the surface level there. And I just can't wait for the third one, actually, mate, to be honest with you. So yeah, it's an 8.5, 8.5 from me. I
Would
mean,
you have had any like desire to go out and watch these like
oh
before seeing
no,
the third
no.
film?
Well, like I think for me, if I, if I never heard of the third film's existence, I probably would like, I
Hmm.
probably never would really watch them. Like horror films were never really my forte, but I can see myself coming around to them more and more. Mate, I think it's one of those genres where you have a lot of different subgenres. If you get me, like you've got the slasher films, you've got the horror comedies, but you've also got like the haunted house kind of demon aspect. So I
Hmm.
think it's a very diverse genre, if that makes sense as well. What about you, mate?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, there's so many layers. Like, I think romantic comedies are usually quite one note. It's
Yes,
boy meets girl
yes.
usually, or in the rare occasion, where they want to be representative. It's something different. But it is just two people meet. They get together. There's a bit of conflict. They break up. They get back together by the end. That's the loose structure, and you can sort of inject new stuff into that. Like with About Time, introducing the time travel aspect into that, which is probably why I love it so
I
much.
love that too.
Because
Yeah, it's great, mate.
sci-fi and romantic
Fantastic.
comedies are my two favorite genres. So when they
They work
meet,
well.
I think that can make a pretty perfect film. But I would say a lot of genres are pretty one note. With sci-fi, you don't go too far beyond
Westerns
aliens and
as well.
technology.
Yeah,
But
westerns
here,
pretty much the same.
I think with the horror genre, you can make wildly different
Oh
films.
yeah,
Like
definitely.
you can't exactly compare like The Exorcist to Freaky.
Yeah,
Because I think
yeah,
they're
yeah.
so polar opposites. But to exist within the one genre, I think is fascinating.
Oh, agreed, mate. Agreed. Like I like every single subgenre there, from your psychological thrillers to your slashers. Like I love all of them. But yeah, I think these two are really solid films, really good, better than I was expecting, to be honest with you, man. But yeah, thanks very much for today, mate. Appreciate your
Thank
time. And
you.
if you guys want to check out our other review of horror films, we've mentioned a lot of them there. You can check out our horror film playlist as well, and this will be in our Movie Mates podcast playlist and Lockdown podcast as well. But yeah, hope you guys are all well. Hope your family and friends are all safe and well too. Take care, everyone, and bye bye.
Bye bye.